My husband introduced me as just a stay-at-home wife at his promotion party, but less than an hour later, the CEO handed me the microphone, looked straight at the crowd, and said something that made my husband wish he'd never opened his mouth. By the end of that night, the applause wasn't for him anymore, it was for me. If you've ever been underestimated by the person who is supposed to love you the most, you'll understand exactly how this story feels. The first thing you should know about me is that I never wanted the spotlight. My name is Claire Bennett, and for 12 years, I believed that supporting my husband was just as important as chasing my own dreams. I met Daniel when we were both 26. He was ambitious, charming, and convinced he would someday become one of the youngest executives at Harrison and Cole Financial in Chicago. Back then, neither of us had much. We lived in a tiny apartment where the heater barely worked during winter. Some nights, we'd eat frozen pizza while sitting on the floor because we couldn't even afford a dining table. Daniel would look at the city lights outside our window and whisper, "One day, people will know my name." I'd smile and answer, "Our name," because I truly believed we were building one life together. When Daniel decided to go back to business school, it wasn't cheap. Someone had to pay the bills. So I worked 2 jobs. During the day, I managed customer accounts for a medical supplier. At night, I freelanced as a graphic designer. Some weeks I slept 4 hours a night. But every tuition payment cleared. Every rent check was paid. Every dream stayed alive. Daniel graduated with honors. Everyone congratulated him. Almost nobody knew who had quietly kept everything together behind the scenes. I never cared. At least, not then. Years passed. Daniel climbed higher and higher inside Harrison and Cole. Assistant manager, regional director, vice president. Every promotion came with a bigger office, a better car, a more expensive suit, and somehow, a little less gratitude. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in tiny moments. He stopped introducing me by my name. Instead, he'd laugh and say, "Claire doesn't work anymore. She's living the easy life." People laughed. I'd smile politely, because technically, he wasn't completely wrong. 3 years earlier, we'd made a decision together. When my father became seriously ill, someone needed to help care for him. At the same time, Daniel's career demanded constant travel. So I left my corporate job. Not because I couldn't succeed, because our family needed someone to make sacrifices. I handled everything. Doctor appointments, insurance paperwork, house repairs, taxes, investments, scheduling, cooking, cleaning, supporting Daniel through every impossible deadline. I wasn't unemployed. I simply worked in ways nobody noticed. Then came the invitation. Annual Executive Excellence Gala. Daniel had finally earned the promotion he'd chased for over a decade. Senior executive. It was the biggest night of his career. He handed me the invitation without even looking up from his laptop. "Wear something nice," he said. "There'll be important people there." I laughed. "Anything specific?" He finally looked at me. "Just, don't be too talkative." I blinked. "Excuse me," he sighed. "Claire, these events are different. Executives have a certain image. Just smile, enjoy yourself, and let me handle the conversations." It wasn't what he said. It was how naturally he said it. As if my voice had somehow become an inconvenience. For a moment, I wanted to argue. Instead, I simply nodded. Of course. The gala was held at the historic Grand Lakeshore Hotel overlooking downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers filled the ballroom with warm golden light. A live jazz band played softly in the background. Servers carried silver trays filled with champagne. Everywhere I looked, people wore tailored tuxedos and elegant evening gowns. Daniel looked happier than I'd seen him in months. He was shaking hands, laughing loudly, accepting congratulations. People surrounded him all evening. I stayed nearby, quietly smiling whenever someone greeted us. Then Daniel spotted a group of senior executives. He grabbed my hand. "Come meet everyone." As we walked over, I noticed one distinguished older gentleman standing near the center of the circle. Gray hair, simple navy suit, no flashy watch, no need to impress anyone. Everyone else seemed to naturally make space whenever he moved. I assumed he was someone important. Daniel began introducing himself. Then someone asked, "And who's this lovely lady?" Daniel laughed. He actually laughed, then wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "Oh, this is Claire." He paused, then smiled even wider. "She's just my stay-at-home wife. She keeps herself busy decorating the house while I deal with the stressful stuff." The group chuckled politely. Someone joked, "Sounds like she's got the better deal." More laughter. Daniel grinned proudly, as though embarrassing me somehow made him look more successful. I felt every eye in that circle land on me. I could have corrected him. I could have explained everything I'd sacrificed. Instead, I smiled. "It's nice meeting all of you," then quietly stepped away. I walked toward the balcony outside the ballroom. The cold Chicago air hit my face. For the first time that evening, I wondered if Daniel even remembered the woman he'd married. Behind me, the ballroom doors opened. Footsteps approached. A calm voice said, "Mrs. Bennett?" I turned around. Standing there was the same gray-haired gentleman from Daniel's executive circle. He smiled warmly. "I don't believe we've ever been properly introduced." He extended his hand. "I'm William Harrison, founder of Harrison and Cole." And before I could even respond, he said something that made my heart skip a beat. "I've actually been hoping to meet you for years." William Harrison wasn't smiling the way powerful men usually smiled. There was no arrogance, no performance, just genuine curiosity. I shook his hand carefully. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Harrison." He chuckled. "Please, call me William." For a second, neither of us spoke. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifted from the ballroom behind us, but out on the balcony, everything felt strangely quiet. William rested his hands on the railing and looked over the Chicago skyline. "I've wanted to thank you for quite some time." I frowned. "I'm sorry. I think you have me confused with someone else." He smiled. "No, Claire. I don't." My heartbeat slowed. How could the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company possibly know my name? He turned toward me. About 8 years ago, Harrison and Cole was preparing to launch a financial literacy initiative for families. I nodded politely. I remember hearing about that. It almost failed. That surprised me. The program had become one of the company's biggest public successes. William continued. "Our marketing department hated every proposal they received. They were expensive, generic, and completely disconnected from ordinary people." He paused. Then someone submitted a freelance design portfolio. I blinked. "No, it couldn't be." William smiled. "The campaign that saved the project was yours." I stared at him. "I designed that campaign years ago." "You did." "I was freelancing." "I know. I wasn't even hired by Harrison and Cole directly." "We know." For several seconds, I couldn't find any words. That project had happened before Daniel became a manager. I'd been contacted by a small consulting agency that outsourced creative work. I completed the assignment, got paid, never thought about it again. William continued. "The consultant who delivered your work tried to take full credit." I looked shocked, but our internal team discovered the original files. He smiled. "Your name was still embedded inside every design." I laughed softly. "I forgot to remove my signature." "No." William shook his head. "I'm glad you didn't." For the first time all evening, I smiled genuinely. William looked toward the ballroom. "I've watched hundreds of executives receive promotions over the years." Then he looked back at me. "But very few people understand what success actually costs." His expression softened. Behind almost every successful leader, there's someone making invisible sacrifices. I suddenly felt emotional. Nobody, not one person, had ever acknowledged that. Not even Daniel. William noticed my silence. He speaks very highly of himself. The sentence made me laugh before I could stop myself. "So I've noticed." William laughed too. Then his face became serious. "But strangely, he almost never mentions you." That hurt, more than I wanted to admit. Before I could answer, Daniel's voice echoed from inside the ballroom. "There you are." He walked onto the balcony wearing his confident executive smile. "There you are, Mr. Harrison. Everyone's looking for you." Then he looked at me. There you are. Not, are you okay? Not, I've been looking for you. Just, there you are. William glanced between us. Daniel, congratulations on your promotion. Daniel beamed. Thank you, sir. It means everything. William nodded politely. It should. Then he looked at me. I was just telling Claire how much I admired one of her projects. Daniel laughed awkwardly. Oh, Claire used to dabble in graphic design years ago. Used to dabble. Those 3 words landed harder than any insult. William didn't smile. I wouldn't call it dabbling. Daniel's grin faded. I mean, she hasn't worked professionally in years. William remained silent. The silence became uncomfortable. Daniel cleared his throat. Anyway, sir, the board is waiting. William nodded once. I'll be there shortly. As Daniel started walking away, he whispered to me without looking in my eyes. Try not to wander off again. Then he disappeared into the ballroom. William watched him leave. Finally, he sighed. Claire, may I ask you something? Of course. When was the last time someone celebrated your achievements? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I honestly couldn't remember. Birthdays had become about Daniel's work schedule. Anniversaries were usually business dinners. Even when Dad recovered after 2 difficult years, Daniel missed the celebration because of an overseas meeting. Somehow, life had slowly become centered around one person. And it wasn't me. William seemed to understand my silence. You know, the strongest people are often the quietest. Before I could respond, an event coordinator hurried onto the balcony. Mr. Harrison, they're ready for your keynote speech. William nodded. Then, to my surprise, he turned back to me. I hope you'll stay until the end. I think tonight may surprise you. He walked away before I could ask what he meant. I stood alone for another minute, trying to process everything that had just happened. Inside the ballroom, guests were taking their seats. At the front of the room stood a large stage with 2 giant screens displaying the Harrison and Cole logo. Daniel was sitting at the executive table, laughing with senior leadership. He looked completely relaxed, completely confident, completely unaware that the founder of the company knew far more about his wife than he ever did. As the lights dimmed, the room fell silent. The host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Harrison and Cole, Mr. William Harrison. Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. William walked to the podium. He thanked everyone for another successful year. He congratulated the newly promoted executives, including Daniel. Daniel smiled proudly as the audience applauded. Then William paused. He closed his speech folder, looked across the ballroom, and said calmly, "Before we continue, there's one person in this room who has never received the recognition she deserved." The audience exchanged confused glances. My stomach tightened. Then, William looked directly at me and said, "Claire, would you please join me on stage?" For a second, I was certain I'd misheard him. The ballroom had gone completely silent. More than 300 executives, investors, board members, and their families turned toward the back of the room. Toward me. I froze. William smiled warmly. "Claire, please." My heart pounded as I slowly stood. I could already feel dozens of curious eyes following every step I took toward the stage. When I reached the stairs, Daniel suddenly appeared beside me. He forced a smile, but I could see panic behind his eyes. "What are you doing?" he whispered. I don't know." He leaned closer. "If he's asking about that old design project, just keep it short." I looked at him. I wasn't planning on saying anything. Good. His smile returned the second people looked our way. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple. Only I knew how tightly he was gripping my arm. William waited until I reached the center of the stage. Then he offered me the microphone. "I know public speaking wasn't part of your evening," he said with a kind smile. "But I'd like everyone here to meet someone whose work has influenced this company more than most people realize." A wave of whispers spread through the ballroom. Daniel's confident expression disappeared. One of the board members leaned toward another executive. "Who is she?" William continued. "Most people believe leadership is measured by titles." He slowly walked across the stage. "I disagree. I believe leadership is measured by the people who quietly make success possible. He turned toward me. Claire Bennett never asked for recognition. She never requested credit. In fact, he smiled. She probably never expected anyone to remember her. I felt my eyes begin to sting. William looked back at the audience. Years ago, our company was struggling to connect with ordinary American families. Our campaigns looked impressive, but they had no heart. He pressed a button on a remote. The giant screens behind us lit up. The audience gasped. Old advertisements appeared. Family photos, community events, financial education posters. The very campaign I had designed years earlier. Our family, our future. I hadn't seen those images in almost a decade. William pointed toward the screen. This campaign changed everything. It became the foundation of one of Harrison and Cole's most successful community initiatives. Our customer trust reached record highs. Our employee volunteer program doubled. And millions of Americans came to know our company through this message. Another slide appeared. This one showed the original design files. At the bottom corner, my name, designed by Claire Bennett. A murmur rolled across the room. Several executives looked genuinely surprised. Someone whispered, "That's Daniel Bennett's wife." Another replied, "I had no idea." Neither did most of the room, because Daniel had never told them. William looked directly at the audience. Success has many faces. Some stand on stages. Others quietly build the stage for someone else. Then, he looked at Daniel. Only for a second. But everyone noticed. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. William smiled again. "Claire, I'd like to ask you something." I nodded nervously. "When you created this campaign, why didn't you pursue a career with us?" The room became silent again. I took a slow breath. I wanted to. A few people leaned forward. But life changed. My father became ill. My husband was building his career. I believed my family needed me more than my resume did. Nobody spoke. I don't regret helping the people I love. I smiled softly. But I do regret forgetting that my dreams mattered too. The room was completely still. No phones. No whispers. Nothing. For the first time that evening, people weren't looking at Daniel. They were looking at me. William nodded proudly. That is the definition of character. The applause started slowly. One person, then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. A standing ovation. I looked around in disbelief. People I'd never met were applauding me. Some were smiling. Others looked emotional. I glanced toward Daniel. He tried to clap, but his forced smile couldn't hide the embarrassment on his face. The spotlight he dreamed about for 12 years had quietly shifted, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. William raised his hand, signaling for the applause to settle. "I have one final announcement." The room immediately became quiet again. He looked at me, then at the audience. Every year, Harrison and Cole presents one special recognition. It is never listed in the program. It cannot be earned through sales. It cannot be earned through promotions. It is reserved for someone whose integrity reflects the values this company was built upon. Even the board members looked surprised. Daniel's eyes widened. He had clearly never heard of this award. William picked up a small velvet box from the podium. Then he smiled at me. "Tonight, I believe we've finally found the right person." William opened the small velvet box. Inside was a crystal medallion mounted on polished black wood. Across the front, engraved in silver letters, were the words, "The Harrison Legacy Award." A ripple of surprise spread through the ballroom. Several executives exchanged confused glances. One of them whispered, "I thought that award was retired." William smiled. It almost was. He gently lifted the award and turned toward the audience. "My father created this award nearly 40 years ago. It wasn't meant for the highest earner. It wasn't meant for the smartest executive. It was created to honor someone whose character quietly changes the lives of others." He looked directly at me. "Claire Bennett, for years, you've represented values that no job title can measure." My hands trembled. I don't know what to say." William smiled. "You don't have to." He handed me the award. The room erupted into applause once again. This time it lasted even longer. I looked down at the crystal in my hands. For years, I'd believed no one had noticed the sacrifices I'd made. Yet somehow, someone had. When the applause finally settled, William stepped back to the microphone. Before we continue with tonight's celebration, I'd like to share something that only a handful of people inside this company know. The room became silent again. Our executive leadership team has been discussing a new initiative for nearly 6 months. The giant screen behind him changed. A new logo appeared. The Harrison Family Foundation. William continued. We're investing in financial education for caregivers, parents, and families who put their own careers on hold while supporting someone else's dream. Several board members nodded proudly. We've searched across the country for someone who truly understands those sacrifices. My stomach tightened. William turned toward me. Tonight, I'd like to officially offer Claire Bennett the position of Executive Director of the Harrison Family Foundation. The ballroom exploded. Some people gasped. Others immediately began applauding again. Someone near the front actually stood up and shouted, "She deserves it." I couldn't breathe. Executive Director? Me? William smiled warmly. The position is yours if you want it. It comes with complete creative freedom. You'll build the program your way. For families who have spent years standing in the shadows. Tears filled my eyes. For 12 years, I'd stood behind someone else's success. Now, someone was asking me to lead. I finally found my voice. William, I don't even know if I'm qualified. He laughed softly. Claire, I've hired hundreds of executives. Skills can be taught. Integrity cannot. The audience applauded again. I looked toward Daniel. His face had gone pale. The executives sitting beside him were no longer congratulating him. Instead, they were looking at him with puzzled expressions. One quietly asked, "You never mentioned your wife created that campaign." Daniel forced a weak smile. It just never came up. Another executive frowned. Why not? Daniel had no answer. For the first time in his career, he looked completely lost. William stepped closer to me. So, what do you say? I took a deep breath, then smiled. I'd be honored. The ballroom rose to its feet once more. Standing ovation. Again. But this one felt different. It wasn't about an old project. It wasn't about an award. It was about a new beginning. As photographers captured the moment, I noticed Daniel quietly leave his table. He walked toward the hallway outside the ballroom. His shoulders were slumped. His confidence gone. A few minutes later, the formal ceremony ended. Guests gathered for dessert and coffee. Everywhere I turned, people wanted to introduce themselves. Board members, department heads, young employees. Many of them thanked me for inspiring them. One woman hugged me. I left my career to raise my twins. I thought everyone had forgotten me. Tonight reminded me they didn't. Her words nearly broke me. Across the room, I spotted Daniel standing alone near the windows. Nobody was surrounding him anymore. The attention had shifted. Not because I had taken it, but because the truth had finally found its way into the light. He looked at me. For the first time in years, there was no pride in his eyes. Only regret. He slowly walked toward me. Claire, I think we need to talk. I looked at him calmly, then glanced at the crystal award, still resting in my hands. Something told me the hardest conversation of our marriage was about to begin. Daniel stopped a few feet away from me. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. Not because he'd lost his promotion. He still had the title, the office, the corner suite. But somewhere during the evening, he'd lost something far more valuable. Respect. He swallowed hard. Claire, can we talk somewhere private? I looked around the ballroom. People were laughing, celebrating, and congratulating one another. This night was supposed to be about Daniel's biggest achievement. Instead, it had become the night we both finally saw our marriage for what it truly was. I nodded. We stepped onto the quiet terrace overlooking the Chicago skyline. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. I'm sorry. I looked at him. He continued. I don't mean just tonight. I mean, the last several years. His voice cracked. I got so obsessed with climbing higher that I stopped seeing the person who helped me climb in the first place. I listened quietly. No anger. No interruptions. He rubbed his face with both hands. When William showed your name on that screen, I realized something. I've spent years telling people everything I've accomplished, but I never once told them who stood beside me. He looked directly into my eyes. And that's the biggest failure of my life. For the first time in years, I believed he meant every word. But sincerity doesn't erase years of neglect. I spoke calmly. Daniel, do you know what hurt the most tonight? He shook his head. It wasn't when you called me just a stay-at-home wife. It was how easy it was for you to say it. His eyes filled with tears, as if that's all you truly believed I was. He couldn't answer, because he knew I was right. I continued. I never wanted applause. I never wanted your promotion. I never wanted people to admire me. I only wanted my husband to be proud of me. The words hit him harder than any accusation ever could. He sat down on a nearby bench and stared at the city lights. I don't know if I deserve another chance. I sat beside him. Maybe you don't. He closed his eyes. But that doesn't mean people can't change. We sat in silence for nearly a minute. Then I smiled gently. I'm accepting William's offer. Daniel looked at me. I hoped you would. I'll probably work long hours. He nodded. I know. I'll travel. I understand. And for the first time in years, I won't build my life around your calendar. A small smile appeared on his face. You shouldn't. He reached into his jacket pocket. From inside, he pulled out the old apartment key we'd kept all these years as a memory. The apartment with no furniture. I laughed softly. The frozen pizza. The broken heater. He smiled through his tears. Back then, we dreamed together. I looked at the tiny key resting in his hand. Somewhere along the way, you started dreaming alone. He nodded. I know. I'd like to learn how to dream together again. I didn't promise anything. Trust isn't rebuilt with one conversation. It's rebuilt through countless small choices. And only time could tell whether Daniel was truly ready. Just then, the terrace door opened. William stepped outside. I hope I'm not interrupting. We both stood. He smiled. I simply wanted to congratulate you again, Claire. Then he looked at Daniel. Success is a wonderful thing. But never forget. The people who celebrate your success should never feel invisible. Daniel lowered his head. I won't forget again. William smiled. I hope not. He shook our hands and returned inside. A few weeks later, my life looked completely different. I officially became executive director of the Harrison Family Foundation. Our first program helped parents, caregivers, and spouses who had paused their own careers to support someone they loved. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of applications arrived within days. Letters poured in from across America. Many ended with the same sentence. For the first time, I finally feel seen. As for Daniel, he kept his promise. He stopped introducing me by my role in the house. Instead, whenever someone asked about me, he'd smile proudly and say, "This is my wife, Claire. She's changing lives." And every single time he said it, he looked at me, not the crowd. Me, because real success isn't measured by promotions. It's measured by how you treat the people who believed in you before anyone else did.